Question number 3, David Clendon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Corrections and asks, what was the reason for issuing each of the 7 performance notices to Serco, which were then withdrawn, and what was the dollar amount for each of those notices?
And before I call the Minister, my officers have been advised this answer may be longer than normal. The Honourable Pesatara Sam Lotu-Iiga.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, performance notices can be issued for many different reasons by the Chief Executive of Corrections under the contract to hold Serco to account for their performance at Mount Eden. Since the start of the contract, 55 notices have been issued for that reason. The 7 notices that were issued and then withdrawn were for the following reasons: unlawful detention of prisoner, 25,000; adherence to search plans, 50,000; incident and contingency protocols, 50,000; compliance with program delivery plan, 50,000; compliance with parole board reports, 50,000; rate of serious assaults, 50,000; compliance with initial health screen, $0. There are serious issues, but I am advised that 5 of the notices were withdrawn because clause 25 of the contract allows Serco to address the issues raised, improve their performance and provide mitigating circumstances for the department's consideration. It is then for the Chief Executive to make a decision on the final outcome of each notice. 5 notices were withdrawn as the required improvements had been made. 1 notice was withdrawn as it was an error of the court, not Serco, and 1 was withdrawn as it was a duplicate of a previous notice.
Supplementary question, David Clendon.
Does the fact that the Minister, when questioned in the House yesterday, was not aware of a $100,000 penalty that had been withdrawn indicate a dysfunctional relationship between the Minister and the Department of Corrections?
The Honourable Pesatara Sam Lotu-Iiga.
Well, to the contrary, actually, Mr Speaker, because the member is confusing 2 different issues. That is, notices that were issued and withdrawn, which I've just alluded to, and notices that were upheld but no specific deduction was made. The former notices are written notices means that Serco provided mitigation information and evidence considered to be robust to support the withdrawal of the notice. The notices that Mr Clendon refers to, the $100,000, are performance notices that have been upheld by the department where Serco is held to be account, and they have rectified the issues and put in place a regime that met the department's expectations. The 2 are very separate.
Supplementary question, David Clendon.
Does the Minister then express his support for decisions being made by Corrections to withdraw financial penalties issued to Serco, even where breaches are being upheld, and if so, why?
The Honourable Pesatara Sam Lotu-Iiga.
Mr Speaker, as I've said, the contract provides for Serco to mitigate certain circumstances and situations, for them to present evidence contrary to the breach notice. That is under the contract. I don't, as a Minister, stipulate what is in that contract. It is there for both parties to meet the terms of that contract.
Supplementary question, David Clendon.
Given that 14 of the 55 performance notices issued have been issued in the last year, 6 of which were upheld, how many more breaches does Serco have to be guilty of before a final warning is issued?
The Honourable Pesatara Sam Lotu-Iiga.
Well, Mr Speaker, as I've said time and time again, in terms of final notices and terminations, it's prudent to wait for the investigation that's currently being underway, that's currently being undertaken by the Chief Inspectorate.
Supplementary question, David Clendon.
Given that Serco is running Mount Eden Prison in order to make a profit, why are very serious contract breaches nevertheless being excused and financial penalties withdrawn?
The Honourable Pesatara Sam Lotu-Iiga.
Well, that's done on a case-by-case basis by the Chief Executive. He makes that call. And in terms of the contract, they must follow the clause 25 of the contract. And I say to that member, go and read clause 25, because clearly he misunderstands it.
Supplementary question, David Clendon.
In light of recent events, does the Minister agree with former Corrections Minister Judith Collins, who said in 2010, when Serco won the contract, I quote, I'm confident that the company will bring the high standards of professionalism, safety, rehabilitation and security expected by the government to Mount Eden.
The Honourable Pesata Sam Lotu-Iiga.
Sir, like many ministers, or all ministers of the Crown, have high expectations around contractors that provide services to government.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order.
I'm still unsure from the Minister's answer whether he agrees with the sentiments expressed in that quotation.
No, I thought the answer addressed the question.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, David Clendon.
Does the Minister believe that his performance in managing the many problems at Mount Eden will give the public confidence that our prisons are being managed safely and efficiently?
The Honourable Pesata Sam Lotu-Iiga.
Yes.
Question number 4, Melissa Lee. Oh, sorry. Order. Point of order, the Honourable Pesata Sam Lotu-Iiga.
Point of order. I wish to table a performance notice summary of Mount Eden's Corrections performance notices for all the notices that have been issued.
Order. Is it something that's available to members on the net? Or is it...
No, it's a Department of
Then I'll
Corrections.
put the leave sought to table that particular information. Is there any objection? There is none. It can be tabled.